everyone. Adrian from Audio Accents Canada. That's Vilip over there drinking his morning coffee.
Oh, tea.
Tea, excuse me. Jerry behind the camera, and Steven's joining us as well. Hope you guys are all doing well. Today is February 27th, and the reason I'm saying that is because, why is there a reason? I don't remember.
We just opened.
Oh, again. That's right. So we are officially allowed to have visitors, although, again, a certain maximum, I think up to 10 people or so in the store.
It's supposed to be 50% capacity.
I don't know what our capacity
Markham is now, again, in a red zone. The city of Toronto is still closed until March 9th.
So we're allowed visitors?
Yeah, so we reopened last Tuesday.
Okay. However, please, if you plan to audition anything, set up an appointment for that, because we want to make sure that we're able to accommodate properly. So we won't be doing on-the-fly demonstrations as we normally do. So please contact us first. Anyway, today we have two topics. This video will start with the first one: how audio retail has changed. Now, the reason we're doing some of these kinds of topics as opposed to doing more reviews is because, one, I'm sure some of you, like I am, are sick of constantly doing Macintosh reviews.
What's wrong with that?
No, I was going to say, there's nothing wrong with that per se. It's just that I don't always want to do a Macintosh. And the reason why we do so many Macintosh is because Macintosh has such a huge range, and they just announced a couple more new products, which apparently are shipping.
There's the Macintosh pillow. There's the Macintosh. We're sitting on the Macintosh chairs.
So we'll get to those new products when they arrive. But I thought we'd cover some topics that might be of interest. At least they're interesting to me anyway. So today, how audio retail has changed, and I just want to maybe look over an overview from the 70s. I don't want to go too far back, but so the 70s, at the time, Vilip, I guess the well-known brands would have been Fisher.
70s?
70s, yeah.
You're out of your mind.
Why? What happened?
By the 70s, Fisher was not really...
Right, but it was still very famous and very popular.
So I remember Fisher as being like the cheapest stuff you could buy at Eaton's.
Had it gone down?
It was just a name. It was just a name.
Yeah.
So after really the end of the 60s, Fisher was no longer really
it was sold to the
relevant.
Japanese.
I mean, even Marantz was already sold by that point.
Right. But they were still, and still are, still is a well-known
so many of those Marantz receivers are all Super Scopes.
That's right. So let me go through some of these brands that I remember: Fisher, Marantz, JBL, Wharfdale. Anybody know what JBL stands for?
James B. Lansing.
What about the derogatory one? Don't say it. Do you know what it is?
I've never heard anything derogatory about JBL. Don't you even go there.
I have. Wharfdale, Quad, Sansui.
Bose, on the other hand, there's lots of acronym explanations for
Do you know the
Bose.
derogatory name for Sansui? Okay, we won't go there. Realistic.
Realistic is not really a brand. It's
It was
Tandy
a brand.
Corporation. They had all sorts of other companies make stuff for them.
I had a Realistic branded stereo system.
Their
What are
brand
you
was
talking
actually
about?
called...
Radio Shack.
Well, it's Radio Shack,
Yeah.
which is not Radio Shack, but Radio, and then I won't say the rest of it. So
SAE, Phase Linear, Kenwood. Oh, Kenwood. I had serious desires for Kenwood back then. M1, P1, and the T1, preamp M and the tuner. Altec, Nico, Nakamichi, Macintosh, of course, Akai. Wow. I'd forgotten. My father had an Akai reel-to-reel.
so did our family.
Yeah. Studer, Carver, DBX. Remember DBX?
Studer was never a home brand.
It was a brand back then.
Well, it still kind of exists.
Yeah. Hitachi, Jensen, Lux. Remember Lux?
You mean Luxman?
Well, it was called Lux back then. And then Maxell. So these are some of the brands that I just came up with just as I was reminiscing about the time.
I grew up with Lloyd's.
Lloyd, yes.
That was the least expensive of the least expensive.
So back when we first came to Canada, we had no money. And one day I was dumping some garbage in the bin area, and I saw somebody had thrown out this Lloyd's receiver with a turntable and speakers. So I took them all home, cleaned them all up, and started fixing it myself. Bought, what was the magazine back then? Electronics Today? I can't remember. I started
That's
reading
one of
through
them,
those,
yeah,
reading
sure.
through the magazines and going to the library to figure out how to fix this, and I actually made it work. Yeah. So anyway, so back in the 70s and 80s, my first memory of audio was that there were a lot of stores. I was going to a church at the time, and my friend took me to a Boxing Day event, and the lineup for this was just a regular store. It wasn't a Best Buy, wasn't Circuit City or anything like that. Just a regular store, and the lineup to get into a hi-fi store was crazy, because I guess back then stereo was the thing. You know, it was relatively new. A lot of boomers were moving out in the 70s and 80s, getting their own place. Peter, my friend from back then, used to say to me, you know, the common thing for a boomer was to move out of their parents' place, get their own place, get a car, get a stereo, get some beer, and then get laid. That was that was everything to do with number 5. And he said as a result of that, he was working in the hi-fi store back then, and he said they were crazy busy. Because
Yes,
all these guys would come in and buy stereo systems, and
because the cooler it looked, the more seductive it was, and literally seductive.
well, you know,
although it never really worked.
I mean, back then the social thing was right. The group was to get together with friends who had a stereo system, party, you know, get drunk and listen to tunes. So that was.
So back in the day, you would actually allow people of who you were interested in like. You would allow them to touch your stereo. Today, not even close, because it's just too expensive, too fragile.
Yeah, so I remember in one of our last videos, we talked about just going up and down Yonge Street, maybe 3 blocks, and so many stores, so many stereo stores, and all over the city, you find a lot of different stereo stores all over the place, and today you don't see that anymore.
So I used to live in Agincourt, and it was very close to Fairview Mall, so I could actually walk there. And it took me a while, but I would go to the mall, and there would be 2 fairly decent stereo stores. I don't remember the names anymore. I bought stuff there. I never spent a lot of money because, you know, but even then, a turntable was $200, dual turntable. So this is the late 70s or early 80s.
Was it Dual who had that vertical turntable?
No, that's Mitsubishi. Yeah, that's a cool table too.
That is a very cool table. I'd buy it just to have one, just to see it play vertically.
So you can get one now from Project. They have a vertical one. We've never brought one into the store, but supposedly it's popular.
Right.
I don't know if they make it anymore, but it was available for a while. But literally, I could go to Fairview Mall, just a normal everyday mall, like nothing fancy in there, and there were 2 stereo stores in there. There might have been a Radio Shack as well. So they were like everywhere. Every corner you went, there was a Radio Shack. There were none of these big box stores. So they were all neighborhood stores. And certainly there was one even closer on Victoria Park. And I remember going there, and he had Sir and Vega and...
Show and Vega. Oh my God!
Listen, that's still relevant because you know our client
Are they still
Rocco.
around? Are they still around?
Our client Rocco,
Yes.
who has 611s,
Yes.
uses them to drive certain Vegas that he bought in the 80s.
Shame on him.
He loves them. He loves them.
And this is the same Rocco who owns Rocco's Auto, and they service top of the line European cars.
They don't just service; they rebuild Ferraris.
That's right.
They rebuild Ferraris.
Well, he's going to be servicing my car, so yeah. Shout out to Rocco.
There you go.
But Show and Vega, are they still around? Are they still in business?
Yeah.
They're still in business?
It's iconic that you know the woofers have
the red or orange surround.
The surround.
Yeah. Well, we had a pair. I think it was called the D9. Back in university at U of T, every Friday we had an engineering beer night, and the whole idea, again, this is, you know, this is just guys being driven by one of our core needs, right? And then the core need is sexuality. And so every Friday night, we would all get together hoping, and we would send out invites to the nurses, the nursing faculty. They never showed up, never, not once. But every Friday, Stephen's laughing, every Friday, all of us would sit down and get beers, and beer was cheap, and
Other
and
things.
fries,
And other things.
and then we'd play music, what we thought was cool music. It turned out, in retrospect, was terrible music because nobody ever showed up to listen to it, and they were all playing through the show in Vegas. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, that's funny.
Yep, good times, good times.
So the other thing that I was thinking about back in the 70s and 80s, do you remember the sources? What were the sources back then?
Well, I mean, so growing up, we had Nakai reel-to-reel,
Yes.
which my father made tapes for.
Yep.
So I must have listened to The Sound of Music about, I don't know, a million times, because that was our favorite one. I mean, when you're 7 or 8. And obviously, the other thing was we had a PE turntable. PE is a German company that's somewhat affiliated with Dual. So this was quite a good, fairly expensive turntable with, and my dad put on there a Shure M3D, which is one of the first stereo cartridges you could buy. So I had that growing up. We would play all of like maybe 5 or 6 records. I still have one of those records. It's an Engelbert Humperdinck record that he bought on sale in like 71, probably from Sam the Record Man or something like that. But we used that PE turntable a lot, and then when we grew up a little bit, we would start buying our own records. So those were the two things. I never made any tapes, but I certainly bought records, and that was always fun. Like you would buy those K-Tel records.
K-Tel, yes.
It's because they would have all the hits.
That's right.
So
terrible recordings.
Terrible
I don't know how they
recordings.
made it. They probably just took like a cassette and dubbed it onto the master and just did it that way.
So
'Cause they
those
were
are the two
terrible.
sources I remember that were any decent.
Well, so back then.
Oh, and the radio.
Yes. Well, reel to reel. Do you remember? Sorry, 8-track.
There was 8-track, but we never had one.
Yeah, my father, in the early days, had an 8-track in the car. So he would buy 8-track cassettes, and we would bring them in the house and listen to those as well. 8-track, I forgot.
So you know there's a renaissance right now with all
8-track?
things tape.
Okay.
So cassette tapes are popular because the mixed tape is still a popular thing. But 8-tracks has found the market again. 8-track actually sounds better than cassette.
I don't
And there
recall.
were stereophonic 8-track units that you could buy that were quite good, quite expensive, because the mechanism, the tape runs is big. It's wider. There's more tape, so more tape running. So you end up with more information on there, and it was somewhat easier to use because you could change tracks really easily, because it was in a continuous loop, and it would have multiple tracks within that, so you could switch easily from one to the other. Whereas with a cassette tape, obviously you had to go back and forth, and it could take you 2-3 minutes to go flip sides.
Yeah. And then, let's see, what else? Yeah, turntables. Those were the sources. We had a lot of sources.
I listened to the radio a lot.
Yeah.
I can remember back in 78, 79, every Saturday night I listened to like disco music on CKFM.
CKFM.
Yeah.
99.9.
Yeah, that's right.
See, how do I know that?
They used to have a disco-themed playlist on Saturday night, so you could be at home and party.
So back when tuners were a thing, like a big thing.
Yeah, the golden age of FM tuners is the 70s.
Yeah. So I was reading Stereo Review religiously back then. Julian Hirsch had measured all these different tuners.
He never hated anything.
He had measured all these different tuners, and he had said that the Carver TX11 was one of the very best tuners that you could buy. So I scrimped up all this money, and I found a dealer who said he had a demo for, I think it was $350 or $400. So I took 3 buses.
3 buses.
Yeah, got all the way there, finally got there, and I asked to see the tuner, and he showed it to me, and I said, okay, I have $350. And he says, no, I want 4. And that's all I had. It was $350 with taxes, whatever it was. I didn't have the $50, and the guy wouldn't sell it to me, and it was talk about false. It was really ticked me off. Yeah, I won't mention the name of the company. I don't know if they're still around, but
Well, probably not. Being this is the
that
topic
was
of our.
that was terrible. Yeah, so we'll get to that. Then in the 80s, I think it was in the 80s, a gentleman from Scotland called Ivor decided that he was going to conquer the world. He came up with this turntable and went around saying that turntables are the most important thing, that everything else didn't matter. You need to listen to turntables. Oh, by the way, get rid of all these speakers you have in your room. And if you remember audio stores back then, I guess to some degree today as well, you'd have 20, 30 pairs of speakers all connected through a switch box. And he said, no, that's terrible. You cannot do a demo that way. You can only listen to your
So we're
stereo
not getting a switch
with
box?
one pair of speakers. And Ivor single-handedly changed the way that the high-end audio industry operated. First, with his insistence that the turntable was the most important in the whole chain. Whether or not you agree with him, he did.
80s
And
or 70s? 70s.
that's what I can't remember. It was either 70s or 80s.
Mid 70s. If you're talking about the LP12,
The original, yes.
then that's about 75.
Yeah, yeah. So
But,
Ivor,
but let's get this straight. LP12 was not an original table.
I didn't say it
What
was.
what is unique about that table and why Lynn was able to make it into a great product is that they were already they were a manufacturing company that made bearings, industrial bearings, and so that's the marriage, is that they put a really great bearing on that design. So that essentially is an Ariston, which is essentially a Thorens from the mid 60s, because I have one of these TD 150s. If you looked at it casually, you would swear, well, that's a Lynn Sondek. But and even though the Thorens had a very, very good bearing, it wasn't as good as the one in the Lynn.
By the way, if anybody from the Lynn factory decides they want to sue us, sue him. I did not say anything other than that Lynn came out and insisted that turntables are the most important thing. So do you remember the turntable wars back then? Absolute Sound had this whole series of different turntables that they were measuring and listening to. Not measuring, but listening to and comparing.
So I bought a Duo 506 for $200, and I was reading lots of stuff.
I had a 515.
You had a 515.
Great
I wanted a
Metropolitan
606,
sound.
but I couldn't afford it. That was $300, that direct drive. I had no clue about what was better. Fortunately, actually, the 506 sounded better than the 606. But my heart's desire was to buy a Bang & Olufsen turntable, which I did.
With
in
the linear
1980.
tracking?
No, I couldn't afford that one. The 8000 was the only one out at the time. It was way too expensive, so I bought 1700, and I spent my college or university money on it. It was about $600. It was expensive. I mean, we're talking 1983. $600 is a lot of money.
Sure.
But that table was great. I loved it until I realized it didn't sound that good. So
I
you
w-
see the theme here. It's like
I
every
would
time I
still-
bought something, I would realize at some point, oh, this is not that good.
I would still buy, if it ever came up, an old, good condition B&O linear tracking turntable. If it ever showed up in good condition, I'd buy it just to have a collection.
I had a 4004.
Yeah. I love the way it looked.
Yeah.
I love the idea. Anyway,
4004 is the one that ended up in the Museum of Modern Art. So, it's part of their
going
permanent
back to my
collection.
question, do you remember the turntable wars? So let me refresh your memory in case you have one. So Lynn was at the time the standard, the benchmark. Everybody was going after Lynn, and then Soda came out.
Oh,
Right? Remember the Soda Sapphire, Star Sapphire, and then Oracle came out with their turntable. And I remember this distinctly because this was when I had my awakening in the high-end industry.
You're talking about the mid 80s.
Yeah, so there was a magazine, it was an underground magazine back then, subscription only, called International Audio Review, IAR.
IAR, yeah.
That's right, Peter Moncrief. Peter Moncrief got his hands on the Oracle Delphi and did a series of tests.
Mark 1?
I don't remember, I think it might have been. Did a whole series of tests and proclaimed that the Oracle Delphi was, let me get this number correctly, 634 times better than the Lynn. I don't remember exactly in what way, but that was the number, 630. And I remember this caused such a big brouhaha, and that caused me to want to seek out the Oracle. And hence my first original meeting with Peter Chu of Straight-Gain Electronics on Elm Street. And then when I saw it, I absolutely fell in love. That Oracle at the time was the most striking looking turntable I'd ever seen. Everything else was just a typical...
It is an amazing piece of
right?
industrial design.
Yeah.
It's so simplistic.
Gorgeous.
It's futuristic. Even to this day, it still is remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the turntable.
But, you know, the
wars.
Lynn still outsells it about 1,000,000 to 1.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in the 80s came the introduction of the CD player. October 1st, 1982, Sony CDP 101.
82? You sure? Is that
1982,
early?
yes. 1982, CDP 101. And I couldn't afford it, so I eventually bought a realistic CD player. Yeah, that was my first CD player. Yeah. And the crazy story was I was so excited. I brought it home, and we had Herbert von Karajan doing Beethoven Symphony No. 9, and the whole series actually, and we had the record as well. So I was trying to show my father and my mom why I spent all this money. So I would cue both up, and I would switch between the CD and the turntable in quick succession. And suddenly there was no noise. I mean, the CD had no noise. The turntable had all kinds of noise, and that was a realistic turntable. But the funny thing was, even back then, I had in the back of my mind, I was thinking, but the turntable seems to sound better. No, it can't be. It doesn't measure anywhere as well. It has all this noise, ticks and pops. But that was my first introduction to the CD player. Yeah. Do you remember that CD player where it was also vertical? What was it? I was trying to remember what brand it was. Was it a Matsushita? Was it a Philips?
Vertical CD player?
Yeah, so instead of loading it in a drawer...
No, there's... Bang & Olufsen made a unit you could hang on the wall.
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't that.
And they had...
Oh, sorry. I remember. You mounted it, you loaded it in a drawer, but it displayed it. It had an optical display so that it seemed like it was spinning vertically.
No.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was called. Maybe one of you guys will remember that. Speaking of that, by the way...
We'll have Jerry search the internet for pictures of this.
Speaking of that, please like this video so it helps with our algorithm, and give a thumbs up, the whole thing. And of course, love to see your comments if you have stories about your systems and so on. I really enjoyed reading those the comments.
We still haven't gotten to our topic.
Well, this is it. How audio retail has changed.
Well, that's how the equipment has died.
Well, why did I skip? Well, actually, no, this is important. Then in the 90s, home theater happened. I remember, back then there were always people who had, a pair of speakers in the back, and you hooked it up in such a way so you had 4 speakers going. But then in the 90s...
Yeah, I ran ProLogic for a while.
Right. Dolby came out with Dolby Surround, and then ProLogic, and then AC3. And I remember selling some very, very expensive surround sound processors based on just Dolby Surround and Dolby AC3. And that's when I think...
Did you have a Laserdisc?
I did.
I did.
I collected them. I had a Pioneer Laserdisc, and I collected all these Laserdiscs, Laserdisc. But I think that's when the audio stores started having to face major issues, because you had home theater, and then right around the same time, custom installations started to become popular. Yeah, and I remember I was faced with that. Thankfully, we were able to accomplish all of those and not lose our interest and our passion for audio. But a lot of stores, because of the revenue that came in from custom and home theater, abandoned 2-channel. And, yeah.
Well, for a long time, Toronto has been considered to be more of a home theater type of city, whereas if you look at Montreal has always maintained more of a 2-channel stereo type of vibe, and I think there are more kind of brick and mortar stores that are in Montreal or in that vicinity than there are in Toronto, and that's one of the reasons why. Because obviously, for a long time, you in the middle of it, I'm pretty sure audio excellence did very well in the home theater market, but that's totally changed. And you can get relatively okay stuff for much. It doesn't cost as much. Prices all went down. The price of TVs went down. So people are spending less on home theaters, but two-channel has suddenly become so pricey to a point of, you know, it's not affordable. For the general public, it's really not affordable. The interest is lost. So, if that's, the demise of brick and mortar stores in the greater Toronto area can be, I think, directly attributed to that kind of shift, because Toronto became much more known for home theater. People were installing big, gigantic home theaters, and now they're all downsizing. Those big homes that we catered to back in the day, those are being sold to new families who don't place the same emphasis on that kind of media room. It's still happening, but not to the same degree that it used to.
Yeah, it was a big thing at the time, for sure. We did a lot of big installs. But also, I think, when certain recessions hit, like in the 2000s and 2008, it made people spend their money differently. And then, of course, we still see huge, ginormous houses being built all the time. But these days, it's more, the entertainment systems are more incorporated in the family room as opposed to having a dedicated room, whereas before there were a lot of dedicated rooms. It's definitely changed. And I see a lot of, I miss a lot of the stores, being able to visit them and hanging out and spending time with them. And so one of the reasons that we're busy is that we get a lot of emails and calls from all over asking for help with their buying decisions or concerns or thoughts. And invariably, these people don't have dealers anywhere near them. I spent quite a bit of time with Wendell from Magnepan yesterday. By the way, we're going to be doing an interview with Wendell next Friday. He wants to cover some interesting topics, one particular, I should say. So watch out for that video once we do the recording. But yeah, a lot of times I'll ask, why are you reaching out to us? Don't you have a dealer locally, which is ideally the best thing, because we don't know you. We don't know your taste, at least I don't. And I can only tell you what I like. I can't tell you whether or not you'll like it. And the answer is always no. There's no dealer anywhere near us or near me.
Well, the other part that's a little bit troublesome is this, and even if there is a local dealer, oftentimes they don't have the expert knowledge to help the consumer, get to the point that he or she wants to get to. I recently just closed a deal. Get this. I was advising someone, and I managed to close the deal for his local dealer so that he could buy approximately $30,000 worth of stuff from his local dealer. So his local dealer did almost nothing, and basically I encouraged him to go ahead and support that dealer and make the deal and buy the equipment that he really wants to buy. So why didn't the local dealer do this job? Why was it left for me to do it? And the reason is because obviously I had been able to develop a trust with this client, and I was able to help him through it. So I don't know why, outside of not having the knowledge, a lot of local dealers can't do this anymore. They exist, but maybe some of the standards have slipped a little bit. What do you think?
Well, again, there are a number of answers when I ask why they're reaching out to us. I'm curious, actually. And certainly one of them is that a lot of dealers don't have the breadth of selection as well. I just saw a comment on one of our videos.
But they should have the knowledge.
Well, one of the comments I just saw in one of the videos that we did recently, somebody commented that he has a local Macintosh dealer, but that dealer stocks almost nothing. and is not even interested in bringing in a couple of options for this person to try, and he says that he was very interested in buying something, and being on this side of the table, I should say, I can understand if a dealer is not doing well, or if the dealer decides that they don't have the market for it, they may not choose to or cannot afford to display the items that we're very fortunate to be able to display. So sometimes it's also difficult that way. I know I spend quite a bit of my time answering emails, and these days, by the way, just as an aside, if I reply to any of your emails and it seems to be terse or short, it's not meant to be terse. It's because I, given how much I have to accomplish every day, I try to get to the point as quickly as I possibly can. But what I do write is what I believe and my opinion, and it's maybe not as lengthy and as accommodating and as nice as I would like it to be, but unfortunately sometimes I don't have the opportunity to do so. So apologies if that's the case. I know I see Vilip spending days composing a letter.
I tend to be a bit verbose.
Encyclopedic. And that's great. Vilip has the ability to and has the time. A lot of times,
Well, I don't really have the time.
Yeah, so I have to be much more practical about my time. I remember sending some emails corresponding with Paul McGowan at PS Audio, and his reply would be, yes, 3 o'clock, fine. Those were his replies.
Well, I'm sure he's getting literally hundreds of emails a day.
Yes, absolutely.
And emails are bad enough for anybody in today's kind of business environment.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the big picture is that, so on the one hand, brick and mortar stores, I think, will get even worse. There'll be less and less of us over time as time goes on. I mean, certainly one of the conversations I had with a manufacturer was that his distribution network is being dismantled over the last 10, 15 years, and there's not a whole lot that he can do about it. He's been trying actively. He hasn't been successful at doing that. On the other side of it, though, is that, I guess it could be good news, we're seeing more new brands than ever. A lot of direct-to-consumer brands, a lot of brands that I've never heard of from all over the world. Some I've had the opportunity to listen to and are quite good, and others are, well, let's just say not nice, not very good. And you'll see reviews of them all over the internet. So just be careful. A lot of times, just because a product gets a lot of chat doesn't mean that it's actually worthy of your money.
So what has changed to a great degree is it's not just brick and mortar stores, if you think about it, but publications have gone by the wayside to kind of alarming degree. Certainly the big ones, Absolute Sound, Stereophile, they're still around, but much of it has changed, and people are now relying on internet-based reviewers. And our colleague, obviously Jay, that's the course he's taken. And to somewhat of another alarming degree, the journalistic integrity of this kind of review or reporting, as it were, is somewhat lacking, in my opinion. I often get these emails saying, so I read and have all these opinions that are being thrown at them, and these are opinions. Some are valid, some are not valid. But there's a lot of confusion going on. So people will just say anything, and all of it's taken at the same kind of level, which is like that it's somewhat true or mostly true. But not all of it can be the same truth. So I get a lot of people asking me, well, what should I be thinking here? Not what do you think, but what should I be thinking? And So when you see these reviews, there's always a kernel of truth in them, but it's not the entire thing. And I have seen very few reviews that are being, critical. They're all more or less, they say nice things. And I've asked the reviewers, well, why won't you say what's bad about this? Because there's some bad things about it. And they say, well, if we say that, we won't get the product.
Yeah.
So that's a really big problem.
Or we send it back. We don't like it, so we send it back.
Well, we've had stuff come through here, and you have not agreed to actually do the review as I wanted to do it, which is to say that here are things I didn't like about it. Here are the limitations of this product, because we didn't want to make offense. But at the same time, we've got stuff sitting back there, so we're sending stuff back.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, in a retail case, we're not officially reviewers. We're just talking about. So in other words, we don't claim to be reviewers. We do this channel for fun, and as a side benefit, we get all this money from YouTube, and we're able to donate it. So that's great. And when it comes to one or two brands that we may not like, rather than, I guess my decision in one particular case I'm thinking of was that I didn't want to come across that sour grapes, you don't want to carry the product, or it's like when we get to the next video, why don't you guys review all these other brands? Well, one, we're not a reviewer, not quote unquote officially, and number two, if we decided to carry the brand and one particular product in that line was no good, I'd say it. And we've actually done videos where you and I have disagreed. You like something I didn't, or I like something you didn't particularly care for it. I have no issues with that. I'm more concerned about if we don't carry it, decide not to carry it, I would rather not say anything bad about it for those reasons.
Well, it's not just anything bad. It's also anything good, because we've had certain brands come through that decide not to carry, and there are some really good things about them, but we haven't been able to highlight those things either.
Yeah.
And the reason we didn't carry it is not because it's not good. It's just because from a business standpoint, sometimes it doesn't always work out.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Anyway, we should wrap up. This video has gone way longer than we thought we should.
Be our least popular video. Like, oh, these guys are talking about nothing.
Nonsense. Anyway, it's our audio equivalent of Seinfeld. Thanks for watching. If you stuck around this long, Adrian from Audio Excellence, Vilip, Jerry, and Stephen. We'll see you again next time. Bye bye.